Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk about the schools bill, which is going to start going through Parliament very soon. And it was mentioned in the Queen's speech back in May. This is an appalling piece of legislation that will completely undermine parents' rights and role as primary educators of their children and bring in effect essentially compulsory schooling through state schools and state indoctrination of all children in a way that we've never had in the United Kingdom, because we've always recognised before that parents are the primary educators of their children and have the right to bring up their children in the way that they see as the best, because they're trusted to do the right thing, and they know what's best for their children far, far more than the state does. And we've always had the understanding that schools are there to serve the parents. Teachers are in loco parentis, they are in the place of the parents, but the parents will trust teachers to educate children according to their values and what they think is the right thing. So we trust schools to teach our children subjects like literature and Shakespeare and British history and mathematics and science and so on. We don't expect schools to be indoctrinating children into Marxist and cultural Marxist ideologies like transgenderism and Black Lives Matter and all of the climate alarmism, which actually is making some children mentally ill because of all the fear mongering that goes along with it. And that is going to get worse with the schools bill, because what they're doing is a number of things. They're saying that all schools by 2030 will have to be academies or part of multi-academy trusts, which carries on from what Michael Gove started in 2010 when he was the education secretary and put in place academies. And that seemed like it could have been a good idea at the time, because local education authorities really weren't up to the job. I mean, there's a lot of crazy progressiveness in some local education authorities, particularly Labour ones, who would try to use schools to do all the indoctrination. But you could pretty much trust some local education authorities that were nominally conservative to actually, leave schools and kids alone to actually do a good job and actually educate children in the maths and science and literature and spelling and reading and writing. That's what you expect schools to do. So to address a problem with local education authorities, they came up with the idea of academies, so that schools will be directly accountable to the Department of Education, but then academies sort of join together in these big multi-academy trusts which are run by corporations. But as the years have gone by, these have become behemoths and monsters of their own that have no accountability to anybody, because there's so many of them and they're doing so many things and they're so opaque. Even though nominally they're accountable to the Department for Education, there is no real accountability, because there's too many of them for them actually to oversee them properly. So what the government is saying is that every school, primary and secondary, must become an academy or part of a multi-academy trust owned by pretty much a non-accountable corporation by 2030. So there will be no possibility of any democratic oversight at all. Even though local education authorities were not particularly great, at least there was some democratic accountability, because in theory you can get rid of your councillors and elect new ones who will actually make sure the schools do what parents want them to do. But even worse than that, they are going to destroy homeschooling and home education. So up to now, anyone can take their kids out of school and home educate them, and there was very, very soft touch oversight by local education authorities. I mean, basically, you can be left alone to bring up your children as you want to do. And most people who want to bring up their children and home educate them, in the 1960s, it was more sort of hippies, into environment and into, planting trees and planting, crops and so on, teaching children how to grow their own food and vegetables and this kind of thing, which was really good. You might not learn about Chaucer, but you learn how to grow your plants and do woodwork and metalwork and fix a car and this kind of thing, along with your basic maths and science. And that's where the home education movement really started in the UK. But as time has gone on, there's more and more Christians and other people who are or people of faith, Jewish people, Muslim people, who are taking their children out of state schools to avoid the LGBTQIAPP indoctrination which is coming, and to teach their children traditional family values. And also parents who are taking their kids out of school because they're being bullied, and schools simply can't do anything about it because it's so endemic, and they have to be careful of being sued by restraining a bully and so on. It is simply, there's so much of it going on that a lot of schools just simply can't deal with it. So parents are taking kids out of their schools, state schools, to avoid bullying. But now what the government is saying is that there must be a register of everyone who is homeschooled. There hasn't been before. And then local education authorities will have a new role of intensely monitoring what is going on in the homes of people who are home educated, even to the point of saying that anyone who is a tutor who gives someone a lesson 1 hour a week has to register what they're doing, that the people that they're tutoring, what they're teaching them, and so on, so that there is very complete surveillance essentially of what's happening in terms of homeschooling. So the state wants to interfere and micromanage home education in the UK. And if local education authorities see anything that they're not happy with, then they can make a school attendance order which will apply for the rest of the educational life of the child. Even if you move from one local education authority to another, that will still apply. So essentially what this is to ensure that children who are homeschooled get indoctrinated into transgenderism, into climate alarmism, into there's all different types of family, to undermine the idea of traditional family values and so on, and to undermine parents, particularly parents of faith, Christian parents, Jewish parents, Muslim parents, etc., who want to bring up their children with traditional family values. And that is clearly the purpose of this. And it is a wicked, wicked power grab by the state to undermine parents' role as primary educators of their children. Only in communist and fascist countries do you have this kind of system. Germany has had compulsory schooling for a long time. It's called the Schulpflicht. It was brought in by Hitler to ensure that all children were indoctrinated in state schools. So from the 1930s onwards, parents were not allowed to home educate their children. They had to send them to a state school. This is not explicitly a Schulpflicht, a British Schulpflicht like they have in Germany, compulsory schooling, but it is implicitly bringing in a compulsory schooling through stealth without them saying. Because what's going to happen, of course, is that local education authorities are going to go into the homes of everybody, make copious amounts of notes on whether parents are teaching them the proper diversity and equality and inclusion agenda topics. And if they're not, then they're going to make school attendance orders, and they'll be up before an activist judge who will ensure that they are enforced. And that will take away parents' rights by stealth. I'd have more respect for them if they actually came out and said exactly what they were going to do and introduce compulsory schooling, because then we'd know where we stand. But this is essentially compulsory state schooling without actually saying it. But they're trying to do it without people realizing. But we're getting smart to their plans and to their agenda. And I'm really glad that a lot of other commentators have noticed this as well and have been speaking out against it this week. It is absolutely vital that this schools bill does not get through Parliament, because it will destroy and undermine the traditional family to a greater extent than it has already been undermined by 25 years of Lib Lab Con government and SNP government in Scotland. They have a different system, it's a different story there, but it's just as bad, if not as worse. So the Heritage Party, of course, is completely opposed to the schools bill. We want to get into power in the next general election. We've got a lot of work to get there, and to do that, so if you can help us, if you can join the party and support us and even stand as a candidate, please do join us. The link will be just below there in the box. But even if it does go through, with us it will have a very short lifetime, because one of the very first things we would do is to repeal any schools bill that becomes a schools act like this. But we will be speaking out against this very strongly over the whole course of when it goes through Parliament until it's withdrawn. And we do pray and act and agitate for it to be withdrawn, because it is a wicked piece of anti-freedom legislation.